In the quiet woods of a remote wilderness, an experienced hunter took his position, armed, alert, and only a short walk from the main road. Hours later, his group returned to the truck, but he never did. What followed was one of the largest searches the region had ever seen. Helicopters, divers, cadaver dogs, and hundreds of trained professionals, yet not a single footprint, belonging, or trace of him surfaced. The forest had been eerily silent that day, and one hunter reported hearing a strange metallic crack moments before the disappearance, coming from the very direction their friend had been stationed. As the days passed and federal agents quietly arrived, another man vanished just miles away. What followed became one of the most baffling searches the region had ever seen, and the mystery has only deepened with time. Welcome to Without a Trace. I'm your host, Jill Lynn. Every file holds a mystery. Every story deserves to be heard. This is Tom's story. Thomas Messick, known to friends and family as Tom, was born on March 14, 1933 in Troy, New York. He was one of 3 children to parents Edward and Anna Messick. From a young age, Tom enjoyed camping, hunting, and fishing. In 1959, Tom married Beverly, and the couple would go on to have 3 sons together, Tommy, Gene, and Rob. Tom served in the U.S. Army as a paratrooper. In his early 20s, an accident from an explosive device cost Tom his eye and left him hard of hearing in one ear. He also needed to get 159 stitches in his right hand as a result. Tom was described as being kind and well-liked. He was a good husband and father. He was an experienced outdoorsman and worked as a hunting safety instructor for years. On November 15, 2015, a group of Tom's friends headed into the woods for a Sunday afternoon of deer hunting. The group had known each other and had been taking annual hunting trips with each other for decades. Tom had just gotten over a case of shingles and nearly decided not to go with them, but at the last minute he decided to go. Tom and his son Rob, along with 5 of Tom's friends, Joe, Al, Sid Sr., Sid's son, Sid Jr., and one unidentified man, headed into the woods that morning in search of deer. The group often hunted in the Lake George Wilderness area. On this day, they chose an area around Lily Pond that they had not visited before. The Lily Pond area in Lake George Wilderness area is your typical wooded area. It's a somewhat hilly area with campsites along the shoreline, forested hiking trails, and a pond stocked with rainbow trout for fishers. Tom and his friends drove up the 2-mile dirt road and parked at the lake. It was late morning by the time they made it. They intended to hunt for deer for a few hours, then return to where they were staying. Tom's role was to serve as one of the watchers, while the other hunters drove the deer towards his location. There were 4 watchers in total. The watchers were said to be spread out at roughly 100-yard intervals from each other, with Tom being the furthest from the lake and the closest to the main road. At 10 a.m., armed with a walkie-talkie, a rifle, and a Snickers, Tom took his post furthest from the lake and closest to the main road. The group didn't come across any deer, so at 2 p.m., the group reconvened at the truck in the parking lot. All but Tom made it back. The others attempted to contact him on his walkie-talkie, but received no answer. Thinking Tom might be lost, the hunters fired off 3 shots in what was said to be a universal distress signal, but got no response to this either. The hunters began looking for Tom, starting in the place they last saw him, but he was no longer there. From there, they fanned out and combed the woods in search of him, but found nothing. Not the missing man, not his rifle, not his walkie-talkie. Around 7 p.m., the sun was starting to set, and the hunters decided they needed to seek outside help. Half the group stayed and fired their rifles and honked the truck horn to attract Tom to the area. The rest of the men left the scene and reported Tom missing to the local forest rangers. It was also at this time that Rob called his mom and informed her that Tom was missing. The days that ensued brought one of the most involved searches in the area in years, as an estimated 29 square miles in remote northern Warren County were covered by more than 300 searchers. The formal search for Tom started on the morning of the 16th. The search started with 13 trained search and rescue professionals from the Park Service. The search was well organized from the start. Something in the air didn't feel right. When the sheriff initially got up to the area where Tom was missing, he said it was completely devoid of wildlife. This time of year, animals should have been busy preparing for winter, and in the heavily wooded area, you could expect to hear birds, squirrels, and deer. But on this weekend, an eerie silence filled the area. The hunters also noticed it was eerily quiet on the day of their hunt. There were no sounds or signs of wildlife, though Sid Sr. did recall hearing a strange sound shortly before the group discovered Tom was missing. He said it was unlike anything he had heard before, and he struggled to describe it as he had never heard something like this in the woods at all. Sources have described the noise as a loud crack, snap, or metallic sound, almost like a trap door closing. Sid Sr. told authorities about the strange noise. He estimated the sound was about 150 yards away from him, which would have been in Tom's range. The police passed the noise off as nothing. The weather was poor. It was raining heavily, making search efforts more difficult. Authorities searched around the area where Tom was last seen, but found nothing. What didn't make sense was that the area was wet and the ground muddy, yet there were no footprints showing where Tom went. Sniffer dogs were deployed before the worst of the rain arrived. Search dogs picked up on his scent around the tree near where he was last seen, but they couldn't track him any further than that. Unsure of where Tom went and with no leads to go off, investigators theorized Tom wandered onto the main road and was hit by a car. Volunteers checked the ditches along the main road but found nothing. Cadaver dogs were brought in as well, both early on and in the subsequent searches that would take place in the days and weeks following Tom's disappearance, but the dogs never hit on the scent of human remains anywhere in the area. The next 2 days of the search brought heavy rains all day. Hundreds of people, including local police, firefighters, forest rangers, and volunteers, participated in the search for Tom. Helicopters were utilized, divers searched Brant Lake and caves, crevices and old mines were checked, but to no avail. Areas were tied off with string to box off specific areas, allowing for a detailed search of every grid zone. It was described as a spider's web of string in the forest. Searchers walked through the woods, including swamps, no matter how thick they were, but absolutely nothing was found. On the fourth day, 2 FBI agents showed up to the search and rescue operations. They just seemed to monitor the efforts. They took notes and wrote a report which was later sent to a behavioral analyst in Virginia. The behavioral analyst's job is to study criminal behavior to help law enforcement understand why offenders act the way they do, predict what they might do next, and guide investigations. Many questioned their involvement, as it's highly unusual for the FBI to investigate an adult missing persons case unless there is a clear indication of foul play. However, if there is any solid reason to assume foul play in this case, that information has never been publicly released. Beverly later said that the FBI told her something wasn't right with his case, but they just didn't know what. The search efforts for Tom continued to ramp up, with the state police and the National Guard joining the efforts, until all the rangers were pulled off Tom's case to search for another missing man. Just 9 days after Tom vanished, another New York man went missing under mysterious circumstances. 68-year-old Fred Drum stepped outside to take a walk on his 170-acre property located roughly 40 miles from where Tom disappeared, and he was never seen again. When his wife returned that afternoon, she found her husband missing, but all of his belongings and his car were where he left them. As with Tom, a thorough search was carried out using helicopters and dogs, but Fred was never found. If there is a direct connection between the two cases, it has never been publicly announced, but it led many to wonder if the FBI was investigating a serial killer. On November 26, the search officially ended. Approximately 29 miles were covered in the search grid, but not a single clue was discovered. Throughout the years, searches would continue, but none of Tom's belongings would be found. Detectives from the State Police Bureau of Criminal Investigation have become more involved in Tom's case as time has passed, with investigators continuing to pursue leads as they are generated. but investigators have not disclosed whether they have any concrete leads as to what happened. The investigation into Tom's disappearance continued, but eventually hit a standstill due to lack of evidence. Investigators were baffled by the fact that no trace of Tom ever turned up. Not his hunting rifle, not his walkie-talkie, not even the wrapper to his Snickers bar. Locals familiar with the Brant Lake region found it puzzling that someone could vanish so completely and speculated perhaps Tom had never actually been there and that the story of the hunting trip was simply a cover-up. They didn't believe someone could become so lost in this area as Tom's position in the hunting line was the closest to the nearby road and the trails are clearly marked. Some arguments against this theory include the fact that the search dogs were able to pick up on Tom's scent, albeit in only a small area. Furthermore, there didn't appear to be any discernible motive for premeditated murder as Tom's pension and life insurance policy were said to be small. Additionally, for this theory to be true, it would mean that all 6 men, including lifelong friends and one of his own sons, conspired to invent this story and hide the truth, which seems unlikely. The possibility of an accidental shooting in the wilderness has been proposed as well, but no evidence for this has ever surfaced. Tom had a history of heart problems, so it is possible that Tom had a medical emergency while out there, leaving him unable to use his radio. However, there's the question of how far he could have wandered while suffering a medical emergency, as well as why the cadaver dogs never alerted to a scent in the area. Tom's wife, Beverly, while unsure of what happened to her husband, is certain that if he'd simply gotten lost, he would have left some sort of clue. Tom had been in the woods since he was a boy and was a hunting safety instructor. He would have known what to do if he had gotten turned around in the woods. Beverly believes Tom would have cut a piece of his jacket and tied it to a tree or done something else of the things he had learned throughout his life. Tom's friends and family miss him terribly, including his dog Willie, who sat by the window every day waiting for him to come home. Tom's case is still open and active today. Searches are carried out periodically in the Brant Lake area. More than 15 agencies were involved in the search for Tom, including New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, the FBI, State Police, Warren County Sheriff's Office, and volunteers from the New York State Federation of Search and Rescue Teams. Despite their extensive efforts, nothing related to his disappearance has ever been discovered. Thank you for listening to Without a Trace. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive into Tom's disappearance. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and follow Without a Trace on social media, and join me next week as I dive into another case.